Thank you very much. Brothers and sisters, friends, distinguished colleagues. My name is Robert Kucheran, and I'm the General Vice President for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades assigned to Canada, and I'm also the Chairman of the Executive Board for Canada's Building Trades Unions. Today is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all here today to the Finishing Trades Institute of Ontario that serves the members of the IUPAT District Council 46 Province of Ontario. The Finishing Trades Institute of Ontario is the only Ministry of Labour Training, Skills and Development and authorized trade school for the apprenticeship program for the glaziers, commercial painters and decorators, and industrial painters. At the FTI Ontario, the team provides first-class apprenticeship and health and safety training by continuously updating and expanding the delivery, methods, and curriculum. This is one of 195 training centers operated by the unionized building trades affiliates across Canada. We are the single largest trainer of apprentices in Canada. Collectively, we spend over $300 million of our own funds across all of our training centers to ensure our members are the safest, most skilled, and highly qualified in the industry. We work closely with our employer partners to try to ensure that Canada has a future supply of highly skilled, well-trained tradespeople throughout the training centers, which can be found in every province and region in Canada. This system allows us and our contractor partners to meet the demands for the skilled trade workers for today and tomorrow. A special thank you to our host, District Council 46, Bruno Mandich, Secretary Treasurer, Mrs. Manager, my brother, and his team for putting this on today, and to Antonella DeCaro, Executive Director at the Finishing Institute of Ontario, the instructors, the apprentices, for all your hard work this morning. Welcome to our elected officials. I saw Julie Zerwich, Peter Fonseca, welcome. And the Honorable Minister Sean Fraser, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, welcome, sir. Now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce my friend, Sean Strickland, Executive Director of Canada's Building Trades Unions. Join me in welcoming Sean.
Thank you, Robert, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your leadership of Canada's Building Trades Unions and International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. I'd like to thank Bruno and Antonella and the whole team for hosting this event here today. I'm the Executive Director of Canada's Building Trades Unions. We represent 14 international unions, 60 different trades, and over 600,000 skilled trades workers across Canada. Thank you to the staff of DC 46, apprentices, contractor representatives for such a great turnout here today. Thank you to MPs Fonseca and Dzurowitz for your attendance, and of course to Minister Fraser for publicly releasing the much anticipated and vital 2023-2025 immigration levels plan for Canada and releasing it here at a union skilled trades training center. The symbolism of holding the announcement here at the IUPAT, International Union of Painter and Allied Trades Finishing Trades Institute of Ontario, is important for several reasons. Historically, it has been through immigration that we have been able to grow our workforce, fill our union halls, and build Canada's infrastructure. Like many of the tradespeople here today, I am the son of an immigrant tradesperson who came to Canada in 1957 looking for a better life and opportunity. CBTU, IUPAT, and our affiliates have supported and continue to support immigration. We also see immigration, especially economic immigration, as a pathway to meet our labor availability challenges of today, just like we used immigration to build our country in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. For the past 100 years or more, Canada's building trades unions are proud of the work we've done and continue to do to recruit, diversify, and train the next generation of workers. But today, the building trades are faced with a challenge. We are bringing in as many workers as we possibly can to keep pace with retirements. But when overlaid with expanding construction activity right across Canada, We just can't keep up. We need immigration to help. According to Build Force Canada, the country needs, over and above all the apprentices that we bring on a normal basis, the country needs 30,000 more new entrants and new apprentices into the construction industry by 2027. More immediately, right now, November 2022, the contractor representatives in this room and the union could use more tapers, drywallers, glazers, and painters to meet the needs of the GTH marketplace. We also need laborers, iron workers, welders, reinforcing concrete workers, and truck drivers, to name a few, to supply the labor force requirements in Ontario, BC, and Alberta. We need workers to build more homes, high-rises. We need more skilled trades for transit infrastructure, highways, power plants of today and of the future, including small modular reactors, hydrogen, wind, and solar. Addressing labor availability is one of Canada's building trade's top legislative priorities. And we recognize there is no quick fix or magic wand that can solve this challenge. We need partnerships with government, unions and contractors and owners to develop a multi-pronged approach, including developing a construction immigration stream to bring in skilled trades immigrants. This program could be modeled after the Atlantic Immigration Program, which the minister is very familiar with, which has been successful in bringing over 12,700 newcomers to Atlantic Canada. Through the express entry system, the government has the ability to prioritize skilled trades workers to bring more workers in faster, and improve and strengthen the temporary foreign worker program, including allowing unions who are interested, not all unions are interested, but some, allowing those unions to sponsor temporary foreign workers, protect workers from exploitation, provide a pathway to citizenship, and permanently address labor availability in Canada through the temporary foreign worker program. We also need to recognize that some construction workers who have come to Canada with valid temporary resident status have fallen out of status for various reasons, but continue to work in construction right across Canada and our major urban centers. We are pleased with the help of MP Dzurowitz on the results of a pilot project in the Greater Toronto area that helped 500 out-of-status construction workers and their immediate families find a pathway to permanent residence. We need to build on the success of this program and expand the program to areas right across Canada. Clearly, there's a lot to do, and it all starts with today's important announcement. We look forward to continuing to work closely with the minister and the government on immigration to address labor availability in the construction industry. I am pleased to say that the minister is aware of these issues for construction and other sectors of the Canadian economy, and is committed to work with our industry to find the solutions we need going forward. We are so pleased with Minister Fraser's openness and commitment and willingness to have dialogue on various aspects of immigration that are key to our collective future as Canadians. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce the member from Central Nova, the Honorable Sean Fraser, Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, to share with us the 2023 to 2025 Immigration Levels Plan for Canada. Please join me in welcoming Minister Fraser to the podium.
Hello and welcome everyone. First of all, to our hosts at IUPAT and the building trades. Thank you so much for playing host to us today. It was great to be able to have a walk through the facility, meet some of the apprentices who are going through the training right now, to see the people who are going to help make a difference to fill key gaps in the labor force to support the Canadian economy going forward. As well to my colleagues, Peter and Julie. It's so good to see you guys here. I'm telling you folks, we got a few champions for unionized labor here and to develop the skilled workforce that the economy is going to need, and it's really good that you guys will be able to make it out. Before I begin, let me first acknowledge that we're gathered here on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And of course, these lands are now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Look, folks, it's simple to me. Canada needs more people. Canadians understand the need to continue to grow our population if we're going to meet the needs of the labor force, if we're going to rebalance a worrying demographic trend, and if we're going to continue to reunite families and to do right by the world and make good on our commitments to support some of the world's most vulnerable. My view is that Canada is uniquely positioned in the world to use immigration to achieve these outcomes. You know, immigration in Canada is not just something that we do, it's who we are, it's who we've always been. With the exception of Indigenous peoples, every family in Canada has the opening chapter of their history include the story of a migrant. My family happened to show up about 250 years ago, and I live only 15 minutes away today from where those first vessels landed from Scotland on the shores of Nova Scotia. Sean, you shared that you're the son of an immigrant tradesperson. This is the story of Canada, folks, and it's going to continue to be the story of Canada. You know, some of our families have come a long time ago in search of economic opportunity. Others have come to be reunited with their loved ones. Others still may not have left their country of origin by choice, but needed to flee to escape violence, war, and persecution. And Canada has a long and proud tradition of maintaining open doors to people who seek to come here for whatever reason it may be. Nous sommes une nation qui s'est construite grâce à l'immigration. Et comme vous le verrez dans le plan niveau d'immigration de cette année, nous continuerons à accueillir les nouveaux arrivants pour soutenir notre économie et faire croître nos communautés. You know, immigration is not just good for our economy, it's essential. We can't get by without it. To understand the economic imperative of welcoming newcomers, I think it's helpful to place this in the appropriate economic context. You know, Canada has experienced one of the strongest economic recoveries from the COVID-19 pandemic. We've recovered significantly more jobs than were lost during the pandemic. Our GDP levels are well in excess of pre-pandemic levels. A couple of months ago, we hit the lowest rate of unemployment in the history of Canada. Yet still, there's challenges. Life's been getting more expensive. It's driving up the cost of building projects, and it's hard to find workers. The reality is you don't need to dig into the stats to understand that there was a million jobs available in the Canadian economy. You need to walk down Main Street of any community in Canada. You're going to see help wanted signs in the window. This is the economic context that we're living through right now. Tout cela se produit à un moment où l'immigration représente déjà la grande majorité de la croissance de notre main-d'œuvre. Nous devons continuer à former notre main-d'œuvre nationale, mais il n'est pas possible de répondre aux besoins de l'économie sans faire de l'immigration un élément clé de notre stratégie de croissance. You know, we need more workers in every sector and every region of the country, regardless of whether it's frontline healthcare workers, truck drivers, home builders, or software engineers. But immigration is not just about addressing labor shortages. It's also about correcting one of the demographic trends that worries me every day. And that's the fact that Canada has an aging population. If you rewind the clock 50 years, you'd see that Canada had 7 workers for every retired person. Today, that number's closer to 3. By 2035, on our current trajectory, it looks like that number's going to be 2. In my part of the country, Atlantic Canada, we're already pretty much there. 2 workers for every retired person. If we don't do something to correct this demographic trend, the conversation we're going to have 10 or 15 years from now won't be about labor shortages. It's going to be about whether we have the economic capacity to continue to fund schools and hospitals and public services that I think we too often take for granted. You know, if we don't address this challenge with more ambitious growth, we know what the outcome is going to be. But the good news is that the recent data that came out just last week from Statistics Canada demonstrates that we are on a better path. We're moving in the right direction with a rate of growth that's extraordinary, including in parts of the country that historically have a lower share of the rate of newcomers that come to Canada, including, again, Atlantic Canada. You might hear a few Atlantic references over the course of my remarks. To put this into perspective, the rate of growth that we're experiencing, the last full year before our government assumed office was 2014. In that year, Canada welcomed 240,000 newcomers. This year, we are on pace to welcome 431,000 new permanent residents as part of our immigration plan. Right now, Canada is growing at a population that is nearly twice as fast as any other G7 economy. There's no question in my mind that we are winning the global race for talent, but I think we can win it by a wider margin if we continue to pursue smart immigration policies, welcome more newcomers, and ensure that we set them up for success after they arrive. That's why I'm so pleased to share today that this year's Immigration Levels Plan will help address some of these challenges that I've outlined by setting a new target from 431,000 this year to 465,000 next year, 485,000 in 2024, and 500,000 in the year 2025. These targets are supported by a plan that's going to leverage new tools, not only to get people here, but to meet the specific needs of the Canadian economy and facilitate the settlement of newcomers in communities that have the greatest capacity to absorb them. Our plan has a focus on economic growth. And by the third year of this plan, 60% of new immigrants will be admitted under economic immigration categories. In 2023, this coming year, we're going to deploy new selection tools to better target sectors that have the highest need for labor in consultation with experts and provincial and territorial partners. We can't afford to keep bringing doctors here who aren't able to work as doctors. We can't afford to bring skilled tradespeople here who aren't working as skilled tradespeople. We're going to work with provinces that are taking steps to recognize the foreign credentials of skilled newcomers to make sure that they can work in hospitals and help build homes across the country. The new mechanism in our immigration system will provide a more nimble and flexible way to match our selection criteria with the specific labor shortage pressures and address strategic opportunities by attracting newcomers with the skills that will be in demand in Canada over the course of the next generation, including specifically the workers who are going to help relieve pressures on our healthcare system and build more homes for Canadians. Il ne suffit pas d'accueillir les gens au Canada, il faut aussi s'assurer qu'ils réussissent. Nous pouvons y parvenir en aidant les collectivités à développer la capacité de faciliter l'établissement réussi de nouveaux arrivants. As part of the targeted draws under the Express Entry system, we will also have the ability to consider which regions demonstrate the absorptive capacity, including housing, that's necessary to successfully welcome new arrivals. The Immigration Levels Plan brings a new focus to regional immigration pathways, including the Provincial Nominee Program, the Atlantic Immigration Program, and the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot, to ensure that we welcome newcomers to communities that have a greater capacity to make sure that they can live without putting undue pressures on our public services. Our new Levels Plan will also allow us to increase opportunities for the talented and hardworking newcomers who are already living, working, or studying in Canada and want to make this country their permanent home. We're going to use a number of different tools to provide more workers who are already here on a temporary basis for a pathway to permanent residency, and to ensure that we have the capacity to grow our population that continues to absorb people in communities that have the capacity to do it well. Alors que nous continuons à accroître notre ambition en matière d'immigration, il est essentiel que nous reconnaissions que le Canada est un pays de deux langues officielles. La proportion de Canadiens francophones hors Québec a diminué au cours des dernières décennies. Et nous devons mettre en place des mesures pour protéger la langue française et promouvoir la capacité des nouveaux arrivants francophones à venir au Canada et à renforcer les communautés francophones, non seulement au Québec, mais dans tous les pays. Afin de protéger les proies démographiques des francophones au Canada, nous tirerons parti des nouveaux outils de sélection du système Entrée Express pour augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones au Canada. Nous continuerons d'investir dans le service d'établissement en français et nous augmenterons les efforts de promotion et de recrutement pour accroître l'intérêt des communautés francophones du monde entier à venir au Canada. Ces mesures et d'autres seront incluses dans le cadre d'une prochaine stratégie nationale sur l'immigration francophone. It's important that we understand that immigration is not exclusively an economic issue. It's also about bringing families back together. In fact, I don't think these two issues are mutually exclusive. People who are able to reunite with their loved ones can actually show faster integration and better economic outcomes as well. It also helps newcomers stay in smaller and rural communities that traditionally would move to larger urban centers after they arrive in Canada. The allocations in this year's Levels Plan are designed to make sure we can reach the anticipated demand we see for spouses and children who want to be reunited with their families. We also want to increase the numbers of parents and grandparents who wish to come to Canada to be reunited with loved ones. In addition, we're establishing new programs that will allow more families to be together while they wait to become permanent residents. This includes recent changes to the Super Visa program and the development of a new temporary visa for spouses who are seeking to become permanent residents so they can be with their families while they wait for their permanent residency applications to be processed. We're also going to continue to lead the world when it comes to refugee resettlement. In each of the past 3 years, Canada has resettled more refugees than any other country in the world. In fact, Canada was responsible for more than 1/3 of the global total number of refugees that were resettled anywhere in each of the last 2 years. We've seen large numbers of Syrians, Ukrainians, and Afghans who've come to seek safe haven in Canada recently. And I'm pleased to share that we now have more than 23,500 Afghan refugees who've been given a second lease on life in Canada, and that we are more than on track to meet the commitment we've published to welcome at least 40,000 by the end of 2023. Now, this immigration plan contains some pretty ambitious targets, but it's backed up by equally ambitious policies to make sure we can deliver on those plans. We've already hired thousands of employees and are hiring hundreds more. And we're making the investments needed to make sure that we have the capacity to deliver on our plan by reducing the administrative barriers associated with applications through new policies and embracing technology as a solution that leverages the capacity of our department to process applications more quickly so workers can get here when and where they're needed. Le plan sur le niveau d'immigration de cette année met le Canada sur les voies d'une croissance de sa population à un rythme beaucoup plus rapide que les autres économies avancées. C'est notre avantage. We are at a pivotal moment right now in Canada's economic history, and we are staring at one of the greatest economic opportunities of our time when people around the world are looking to move, and Canada has become the world's top destination for people who are thinking of leaving their country of origin to pursue economic opportunity elsewhere. It's up to us to seize this moment and take advantage of this opportunity. I'm looking forward immensely to seeing Canada continue its tradition of welcoming newcomers, which is as important to the national interest today as it has ever been. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Merci tout le monde. And I think we've got a moderator to take questions here somewhere.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, everybody. That's my job. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andre Visser with IRCC Communications. We are going to start the question and answer period right now. I would like to remind, we're going to take questions on the floor, and we're going to take 3 questions here today, and with 1 follow-up per reporter. Prior to asking your question, please give your name and media organization that you are representing. Bonjour, je m'appelle André Visser, en communication avec IRCC. Nous allons commencer la période de questions-réponses avec le ministre. Si vous avez une question, avant de poser votre question, veuillez vous donner votre nom et média que vous représentez. Nous allons prendre 3 questions sur le plancher aujourd'hui. Who can I start with a question here today? Oui, bonjour.
Bonjour, Myrna Djukic pour Radio-Canada. Monsieur le ministre, on sait que l'Ontario réclame depuis des mois maintenant d'avoir les mêmes pouvoirs que le Québec en matière d'immigration pour pouvoir justement mieux répondre à ses besoins spécifiques en matière de pénurie de main-d'œuvre. Donc, que répondez-vous? Pourquoi ne pas encore avoir répondu aux demandes du gouvernement Ford?
Alors, merci. Et j'ai envie de pratiquer mon français. Si j'ai fait une erreur, je m'excuse, mais je pense que je comprends la question. L'immigration est dans la juridiction du gouvernement fédéral. Mais nous avons l'opportunité pour travailler en collaboration avec nos partenaires provinciaux et c'est essentiel pour continuer de travailler avec eux pour établir des priorités qui obtenir les bouts pour des régions différentes au Canada. J'ai beaucoup de conversations avec mon homologue en Ontario, ministre McNaughton, who, by the way, is a big supporter of the skilled trades as well. Et je pense que nous avons l'opportunité pour augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants dans les voies pour les nominés de la province, en anglais, le Provincial Nominee Program, et aussi d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants qui a l'habilité pour satisfier les besoins de les provinces dans les nouveaux outils dans les systèmes entrée express. Just to elaborate in English to make sure I'm covering the point, I think it's really important that we understand that the federal government will always retain core jurisdiction over immigration. On questions of admissibility in particular, there is no ability of any one province to completely assume this role. We have partners that help with security screening and admissibility screening that can only be done on a bilateral relationship with other nations. When it comes to the provincial nominee program, though, one of the commitments that we've made to reduce the administrative barrier through the provincial nominee program is to stop checking provincial government's homework. The approval rate of people who are nominated by a province that complete the admissibility screening is nearly 100%. We're doing what we can to spend less time reassessing and assessments that's been conducted by provincial governments so we can speed up the process for newcomers to get here, and we'll continue to work with them as we set the priorities for these new tools that we have under the express entry system to meet local labor market needs in Ontario and frankly the rest of the provinces in Canada as well.
Oui.
Pour le suivi, plus spécifiquement, vous parlez du programme du Provincial Nominee Program. le gouvernement Ford veut doubler à 18 000 immigrants le nombre le quota pour ce programme. Est-ce que c'est sur la table pour vous?
Nous augmenter dans ce plan le nombre de nouveaux arrivants dans ces voies. On met les nombres spécifiques pour chaque province. It will be a public, sorry for going in both languages here, in March of this year. One of the exercises that we need to complete before we commit specific numbers to specific provinces is to understand which provinces make use of the allocations that they've had last year. We want to make sure that when we go through the exercise of allocating specific spaces to each province, that we're not allocating spaces to provinces who may not have the capacity to meet them. We've got an increase in the overall number under the provincial nominee program, and how that interplays with the increase in other regionally focused programs, such as the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot or the Atlantic Immigration Program, is an exercise that we'll do in consultation with our provincial partners to make sure we're doing what we can to meet their needs. I speak frequently with my provincial counterparts, including here in Ontario, and we'll look forward to working together to do what we can to help meet their needs in advance of making those numbers public in March.
Thank you, Minister. Before we continue with questions on the floor, we're going to go to the operator. And operator, do we have any questions on the phone? Operator? No? Okay. Sorry, we're having technical problems, so we're going to continue. We have a question over here.
Hi, Adrian Gabriel with CTV National News. Minister, you know, it's a great plan to bring immigrants here to deal with their economic needs. You touched as well about refugees and bringing refugees here in your government's ambitious plan. Over several months, I've been speaking with refugees, and the IRCC and the agencies that are paid for by taxpayers have shown a repeated inability to deal with their unique challenges. For one example, when it comes to housing, we've had refugees from Afghanistan, from Syria, who've been stuck in hotels, some of them for a year or even more, because they haven't been able to get their paperwork and they haven't been able to find adequate housing. Over the last couple weeks, 2 refugees have chosen to self-harm themselves to try and get your government's attention that they need housing. Last week, a Palestinian refugee stabbed herself while in a meeting with Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. What would you say about the desperate situation that refugees are facing as you so plan to bring more here?
So look, thank you for the question. And I think one of the challenges that I've experienced over the course of the last year is that you come to understand that Canadians are very proud of being welcoming towards some of the world's most vulnerable. What I think a lot of Canadians don't appreciate is how difficult life can be for people after they may be in a country that the world views to be amongst the safest in the world. Not everybody hits the ground running and has a complete turnaround in the quality of life that they get to enjoy. Housing is a particular pinch point across the entire economy, but of course for vulnerable people that are coming here as well. So there's a couple of things that we're doing to try to address this problem, and to understand the specifics of any individual case, of course, we need to dig into those individual factors. The different things that we're doing are working very closely with settlement agencies to figure out when people actually have the capacity to resettle families as they arrive. We do our best not to overwhelm any one community, but at the same time, if we have a level of urgency as a result of conditions a person may be facing if they don't get here quickly, we want to make sure first that we protect them from a safety point of view, and then do what we can to help them establish once they're here. We fund settlement services in every province in Canada to make sure that as we have more people coming in, those settlement agencies are able to continue to support people. But the reality is the long-term solution here isn't just partnering with settlement agencies. Part of the problem is the fact that there's no housing availability. This immigration plan has a major focus on expanding access to housing and reducing the pressure on our housing system by bringing in larger numbers. Some of the things that I pointed to, and it's all intertied even though it may not specifically be on our refugee policy, it does have a spillover effect when you actually increase the rate of vacancy that could be in a community. The different things that we're doing within this immigration levels plan to address this challenge is to make sure that we're pushing people to regions that have more capacity to absorb newcomers. It's not a coincidence that we're talking about establishing stronger regional pathways. We're also going to leverage the ability of people who are already here, living in a home, to convert from temporary residency to permanent residency. This is on the side of the equation where we're trying to not increase the pressure on our housing system. But we're not going to solve this problem if we don't build more housing. Realistically, we need to leverage the new flexibilities that will kick in 2023 to do targeted draws for people who have the skills to build more houses. That is part of the path forward under this plan. Of course, we're going to continue to work with the people who are supporting some of the vulnerable families that have lived here, but the long-term solution is not just to work with those organizations that provide direct support, but to help solve the systemic problem of a relative lack of housing across Canada's economy.
Today, there's refugees in hotels who haven't been able to find housing, and your long-term vision and the government's plan for the future is great, but it's not addressing what they need now. Share one other troubling story about a family of Syrian refugees who came, and the mother of this family has cancer, and she was told by the Canadian government that she'd be able to continue treatment when she came to Canada. She saw a doctor on her first day here, and then for 6 weeks, nothing. And it was shown later that the hospital actually had requested for her to come back, but the settlement agency hadn't relayed that message. What can your government, or what is your government doing to deal with the unique needs that refugees are facing right now and have been facing since they've been brought from Afghanistan, Syria, and elsewhere around the world?
So, look, a couple aspects in my response. First of all, we want to do what we can to support the greatest number of vulnerable people, both in terms of getting them here and making sure that they do well. Most of the people who come here have a much better experience as a result of coming to Canada, but there are really problematic cases. You've highlighted a few of them. It sounds like in this particular case there was a breakdown not between the government and the individual, but the settlement agency that was serving them. I'd have to dig in on the specifics of the case because I don't want to criticize our settlement partners who've been wonderful contributors to the well-being of refugees that are here. But the reality is we need to continue to actually fund them properly to make sure that they can support people who are here now. When there are problematic cases that we learn about, we need to make sure that we speak to the settlement agencies to understand what they're doing to make sure that the money that we're providing to them is accomplishing the outcomes that we hope to set with them. Nobody feels good about someone who comes to Canada under the promise of a better life and can't receive cancer treatments. If there's specific items like this, of course, our office is happy to look into them, and maybe we can follow up after today to get more details on the specific case that you've raised.
Thank you. We are now going to proceed with the government teleconferencing system. Operator, do we have a question on the line?
Thank you, merci. You may press star 1 if you have a question. Vous pouvez appuyer sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. We have a question from Alison Northcott from CBC. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm wondering about the backlog in immigration applications. Where is that, what number is that at right now, and how will this announcement in terms of bringing in, how does the government plan to deal with that backlog given you're increasing the number of immigrants?
So look, thank you for the question, and I think first it's really important to understand what the immigration levels plan is. This is a plan to resettle permanent residents in Canada. Frankly, this year we made some enormous strides to get our permanent residency streams back on track. We have now achieved a level of service where a new applicant under the express entry system is expected to take 6 months, which was the pre-pandemic service standard. When we look at the federal family reunification stream for permanent residents, the standard of service that we offer is 12 months, and we have now reached that standard for new applications that come into the system as well. Now, there are still applications that are in the system today that have been in longer than that, and we're not going to bump them from the line to process new applications first. We've actually done the work to get caught up and made some pretty difficult decisions, in fact, on the federal express entry stream, to previously put a pause in place that we lifted in July so we could clear the backlog of permanent residency applications. We actually have, though, a history of meeting very ambitious immigration targets when it comes to permanent residency. I know last year we set a record of having 405,000 that landed in Canada, which exceeded the target. And this year we're more than on track to hit a very ambitious target, a record breaker, of 431,000. The challenges that we see on processing are less connected to permanent residency unless you're actually dealing with certain programs that have more applications coming in than we've created spaces for. This plan will actually help solve that problem by creating more spaces in certain streams that have an intense demand. parents and grandparents, for example, is dramatically oversubscribed, and by creating more spaces, we will actually reduce the wait times for people coming through that stream. The same is true through the Startup Visa Program, which we're increasing spaces for to bring more tech entrepreneurs to Canada that are going to be able to potentially create hundreds or in some cases even thousands of jobs for Canadian workers. When we look at permanent residency, we can actually deal with some of the processing challenges by increasing the level space. Reducing our spaces would exacerbate processing challenges. The challenges that we've been having with backlogs today have more dramatically been on the temporary side of business. Think of work permits and study permits and visitors who are seeking to come to Canada. We've made a lot of progress over the last number of months in order to address some of these challenges. There's no one silver bullet. It takes every tool in the toolbox to solve this challenge. It takes resources, it takes policy, it takes technology. More specifically, we're in the middle of a hiring blitz to add at least 1,250 staff to process applications more quickly. We put $85 million in last year's economic and fiscal update to speed up processing on work permits, study permits, temporary residence visas, proof of citizenship cards, and PR cards. The backlog for PR cards has more or less been eliminated, by the way. We're in a position right now where by the end of the year we expect to be back to the service standard for work permits and for study permits. Visitors' visas will spill into 2023 on the current schedule when I'm looking at the impact of the policies that we've had. But we're also advancing digital solutions to leverage advanced analytics to ensure that we're offering automatic extensions to low-risk and high-volume applications, such as automatic extensions for study permits, which we announced a few weeks ago. And we're in the middle of moving towards a completely digitized system, which is the long-term solution here. The reality is, in a paper-based system, which we've had for many years in our immigration system, it's not possible to leverage the strengths of our global network. When we pivot to a proper digital platform over the next couple of years, we'll be in a position where if our office in Delhi is overwhelmed with volume and our office in London is slow, we'll be able to process the applications from Delhi in our London office. These are the kinds of changes that we're making now that are going to dramatically improve the speed at which we can process applications. But when I look at the numbers, we're trending in the right direction now, and I expect that we're going to be back on track, in particular for work permits and study permits by the end of this year.
Thank you very much, Minister. I believe we have another question with Radio-Canada au téléphone. Go ahead.
Absolument. Bonjour, je m'appelle Mélissa François pour Radio-Canada Montréal. J'aimerais savoir, Monsieur le ministre, si vous pouvez être un petit peu plus précis concernant votre stratégie pour augmenter, rehausser l'immigration francophone au pays.
Merci. Maintenant, c'est essentiel de comprendre que le rôle du gouvernement fédéral, c'est un enjeu différent que le rôle du gouvernement du Québec pour l'immigration au Québec. Mais pour les communautés francophones hors Québec, c'est essentiel pour le gouvernement fédéral d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones. C'est essentiel pour la communauté francophone de voir un avenir de notre pays avec une présence, avec les poids démographiques qui a augmenté, pas déclin. Alors maintenant, nous travaillons pour créer une stratégie nationale d'immigration francophone. C'est essentiel pour notre gouvernement de protéger la langue française, de promouvoir la culture française. Le Canada a un pays avec les deux langues officielles, maintenant et dans l'avenir. Si vous voulez augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants en général, c'est essentiel aussi d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones. Avec les nouveaux outils dans le système d'entrée express, c'est possible pour choisir les candidats avec les compétences linguistiques. C'est possible pour accueillir la personne qui travaille dans les garderies francophones au Nouveau-Brunswick, par exemple. Il y a des autres features que le gouvernement travaille plus fort maintenant pour établir les nouvelles stratégies, pour améliorer la qualité du recrutement, pour ouvrir une présence au Cameroun, pour établir les voies pour des étudiants directs au Sénégal et au Maroc et des autres features aussi. Ce n'est pas possible pour continuer d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants en général si nous continuons aussi d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones.
Merci beaucoup, ministre. Nous avons une question sur le plancher. We have a question on the floor. Go ahead.
Good morning, Minister. Paula Saraza from Omni Television. You mentioned selection tools in 2023 for those newcomers coming with, credentials to help the economy and to help them return to their professions easier. But what about those internationally trained professionals who are already here but are still struggling to return or to go back to their professions? Do you have any plans on helping them make the process easier?
Yeah, we do, but we can't do it alone. The reality is most workers in Canada who are in a regulated profession are in a profession that's regulated by provincial governments. We don't have the legislative stick, for example, to insist upon new criteria for the recognition of healthcare professionals' qualifications. We do, however, have a carrot, so to speak, and we've established a new fund in the last federal budget with $115 million to provide training for professionals to obtain their credentials just in healthcare. We're continuing to work with different provincial governments and community organizations and institutions that provide that training. But what I think we're going to be able to do is create a new incentive for jurisdictions to continue to facilitate the ease with which people can have foreign credentials recognized. As part of the announcement today, the changes to the express entry system are going to allow us to select professionals who are going to meet key gaps in the labor force. A healthcare professional that isn't allowed to work in healthcare is not going to meet a gap in the labor force. We're going to be able to work with jurisdictions that are doing some really good work right now, by the way, to facilitate the ease with which people can have credentials recognized by demonstrating to them that if you sort out these challenges you're having on foreign credential recognition, we can more easily justify a targeted draw in your part of the country that will allow someone to come and to work at their full potential. I'm done with bringing healthcare professionals that we don't let work in their profession. It doesn't make any sense, and we need to change the way we do things. And with the immigration levels plan we've tabled today, we have one more tool in the toolkit that's going to make life easier for talented people who want to come and make a full contribution to Canadian society.
And lastly, there are a lot of applicants who really rely on the TR to PR pathway. I know we've mentioned a couple of times, but is there a possibility to have that pathway or program again, or any similar program that we would be expecting in the coming years?
So today's immigration levels plan does not include a repetition of the TR to PR pathway that was developed in the pandemic, which was a response to a very unique time-limited challenge we were facing, where the border was closed to international travel to protect public health. That said, we have plans to make it easier for people to convert their temporary residency to permanent residency. In fact, the number of people who are becoming permanent residents that already have temporary status is enormous. Last year alone, there was 150,000 new permanent residents who got their start in Canada as an international student. We're going to continue to leverage these temporary programs by increasing our level space to allow more of them to come to Canada, by looking at what we need to do to constantly assess the points system in express entry to determine the Canadian experience that people may have and to factor that in, as well as considering how we can use the express entry system to make sure that they're welcoming to people who may not put additional pressure on social services or housing. There is no one particular solution that will help achieve this problem. There's a number of different tools, and in my view, we need to look at every single one of them to make it easier for people to convert temporary status to permanent residency. There's more policy work to be done. In particular, I'll point to my mandate letter commitments to establish a pathway to permanent residency for both temporary workers and international students, and the work is underway right now.
Thank you, Minister. This is our last question of the day. Go ahead.
Hello, Minister. This is Taranjit Kaur from Hamdard TV. So we all know that international students are a billion-dollar industry. They are coming with so many dreams in their eyes. But when they are coming here, they are studying in the colleges and universities. In the sudden of their semester, they came to know that the license of their colleges are getting cancelled and everything happening like this, and they are going in depression. Is federal government working with provincial governments on these types of matters, because their Canadian dreams are getting shattered and they have no other option than returning back and or doing protest?
So look, before I answer your question about international students who are dealing with some really challenging consequences to decisions taken sometimes by institutions and sometimes by promoters who sold them a false bill of goods, which is an unjustifiable behavior in my opinion. We should point out that the international student program across the board makes extraordinary contributions to Canada, but also to most of the students who come through the program. But there are problems that we need to address. And you said it's a $1 billion industry. It's actually in excess of $23 billion every year international students contribute to our economy. It's not right when we see people come here under the promise of a better life in Canada and deal with mental health situations that are driven by certain expectations not being met. One of the challenges that we have is the role of the federal government is to run the program to allow people to come to Canada. But we need to work with other levels of government to ensure that the institutions are monitored very closely, to ensure that they're providing a quality experience. I've had this conversation with a number of my provincial counterparts where we do see problems, and we see particular private career colleges that maybe don't support students as well as they should. And I don't want to paint all private career colleges with the same brush, by the way. There are many good actors that are essential to meet our economic needs. But when I look at an institution that has a building that can hold a couple hundred people and has several thousand students, something's wrong. We need to work with provincial governments to help them establish stronger criteria as to who gets to become a designated learning institute. Make sure that there's an auditing process so that there is no ability for institutions to allow students to fall into these traps, and to share good information all over the world so students actually know what they're getting themselves into. We've taken steps to regulate the profession of immigration consultants in Canada that I think is going to make a meaningful difference, but you can appreciate that we don't have the jurisdiction to do the same thing on another part of the world, where promoters are sometimes giving false information in order to profit off the backs of vulnerable international students and their families. This is something that we don't have all the tools for at the federal level, but we're here willing to partner with each and every province to make sure that fewer international students fall victim to this kind of trap, when in fact we depend so heavily on international students to support our post-secondary institutions and to become, frankly, the next generation of Canadian citizens who show extraordinary social and economic outcomes.
Thank you so much. And my another question is regarding LMIA. There is so much exploitation going on the name of LMIAs. So how are you going to make it sure that these type of exploitation should not be considered good? So there are many people who are getting exploited from their employers. So what is federal government doing on that?
So, look, not every case of misuse of LMIAs is the same. If you're talking about situations where somebody holds an LMIA and sells it to another actor they're not entitled to sell it to, that's very serious. And look, I'll perhaps speak out of turn a little bit because it's managed by one of my colleagues, Minister Qualtrough, who focuses on this issue every day. But when you're talking about somebody who's conducting fraud, we need to demonstrate that that's unacceptable and punish the bad actors when they're discovered. We do find some challenges because a lot of people are promising people a better life and opportunity to come work in Canada on the condition that information is not shared about their behavior. So we need to continue to work with our colleagues in ESDC to monitor the recipients of LMIAs to make sure that the process has integrity. I'd invite you to follow up with my colleague who I know could give you a more fulsome answer on the very specific issue of the misuse of LMIAs, but would be happy if you want to send a follow-up to our team to dig that information out on her behalf.
And thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much. This concludes our event today, everybody. Thank you. Ceci conclut notre événement. Merci beaucoup. I would like to do a picture, if we can get our guests right over here, by the Canada flags, right over here. One big last final family picture, if that's okay. We'll come up right over here. Please come on up, Antonella. Come on up, please. Come on up. Yep. Please, please. Please. Yep. Come on up, gentlemen, please. Yeah, come on up. Yeah. Yeah, come on up. Please, please.